Thank you so much for joining us, everyone. So, looking forward to this great session. Today, we are talking about systems and processes and why being efficient and productive during these times can secure the future of your business. So, one thing you can do is jump on Q&A section and ask our panelists the questions. There's an amazing lineup of experts here today, so I would really encourage you to ask them some questions. The other thing that you can do is also raise your hands by using the raise hands button down the bottom, and then you'll be able to join us on screen so that you can ask them the questions directly. So I'll go straight into introducing some of the speakers. So Ishan is an author, productivity expert with a wealth of knowledge, working across 6 countries for nearly 2 decades, including large multinationals. He was involved in developing a global supply chain excellence program for one of them. Renowned for his simplified techniques, Ishan works with manufacturing businesses to move from chaos to excellence through productivity improvement programs and frontline leadership development programs. And we've got also Brian and Prue. So Brian Keane has been involved in the franchise industry for more than 30 years. He is the founder of Franchise Simply, where his on-the-ground business experience as a multi-unit franchisee, franchisor, and consultant, helping many of the big names create their own franchise systems. And Prue, his partner, brought her long history with policy and systems and development in environmental management to join Brian as a co-founder of Franchise Simply. Their way to systemize helps businesses grow from 2 to 3 and up to 400% in the 3 to 6 months of working with a particular franchise. So we have Brian and Prue and Ishan as well there. And we've got Krys. Krys is a business owner, began in 2007. So she's a small business owner when her husband, Adam, quit his job and established an electrical and mechanical business specializing in automation. Automated Control Solutions was the company. Krys has gone on to build several companies that has seen her directorship of these companies enable her and her teams share skills and experiences with other business owners. Her strong skills in leadership systems and proven success in establishing businesses from the ground up. She is passionate. Her passion for learning allows her to bring a unique perspective to business. We also have Kerry Sheaves. Kerry is an award winner, business owner, and managing director of the small business solutions company Foundation Business Pty Ltd. She has worked with micro and small business owners, helping them grow their businesses for over 12 years. Prior to starting her own business, her career in large corporates, including senior management roles for PwC Australia and Optus. Kerry's key business driver is to increase the effectiveness of small businesses, reducing the rate of failure by providing practical and achievable help. And you've just heard from Namoki as well with her amazing systems workshop. So thank you so much for joining me, everyone. Excellent. So let's delve straight into the questions. And Ishan, I'll start with you. What is the one thing small businesses can do to reduce the daily firefighting when it comes to systems and processes in business?
Yeah, thanks, Yop. And in fact, it's not just the small businesses, and this is pretty much my advice to the mid-tier businesses. And in fact, this is probably what I've seen with a lot of the multinationals as well. I'll speak in terms of manufacturing because that's my background, but all your listeners would be able to relate this to their sector. One of the things in manufacturing businesses, they have these daily huddles, which is a quick pulse check meeting that takes 15, no more than 20 minutes. And if you can implement a system of having a daily huddle meeting around a few key metrics that gives literally the health check of what the business status is, and then if you can take some specific actions to be taken over the next 24 hours, we find that the day-to-day chaos tends to come down. So that's the one thing, if you want to reduce the firefighting, that you can put into place.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Ishan. I guess then, Krys, when we know the importance of systems in business, however, we need to get a better understanding of how to create these timelines on building our systems. And obviously, Ishan spoke about how the firefighting for businesses works there. Do you know? Do we know that we need a system built in our business? So when do we know? When do we need to know when we need to have systems built in our business?
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this. I think that sometimes as business owners we don't know until it's too late. So I think those daily huddles are fantastic, and that's all part of scaling up and really, growing our business. In relation to when do we need a system, I learned that from a 6-year-old who told me that system is saving yourself time, energy, and money. And that is exactly it. So when you find yourself that you can save time, energy, and money, start developing a system.
Excellent. Well, probably one of the best answers I've ever heard, so which is great. Kerry, small businesses find it hard to build good systems and solid systems. Why do small businesses find it so hard to or avoid systemizing their business in saying that?
Hi, up. Look, I think there's probably 2 big barriers when it comes to any business, but particularly the small micro businesses. Systemizing. And really the first barrier is that we want to control, or entrepreneurs, that's one of the reasons why we've gotten into business. We want to control our destiny, but we don't like being controlled. And so we think that setting up systems and processes is creating a framework or a bit of a prison around us. And so it's a bit uncomfortable. And when we begin, it's overwhelming because the task that we take on when we start to think about systemizing our business and creating processes, we're probably quite ill-equipped to do. It's not something we've necessarily been trained to do. We don't necessarily know that we have access to tools like what Namiki went through with us today. I think the other barrier, though, is that we struggle with the misconception that systemization is actually standardization, and it's not the same thing at all. As service providers and product providers, we believe that we offer something quite unique to a unique clients who all have differing needs, and that we want to genuinely tailor our services so that we get ahead of our competition. And as a result, then we balk at the idea of systemizing and standardizing what we do because we don't want to become a McDonald's. We want to be something that's providing genuine value to clients as they need it. Of course, the challenge with that is that as soon as we start avoiding creating systems and processes, what we actually create is chaos and something that becomes quite unreliable and inconsistent in the way that we deliver. As a result, our customers actually struggle with that because they want reliability, they want consistency, but they also still want that handheld bespoke service offering at the same time. So there's this fine balancing act of embracing a framework of control and systemization that allows a level of freedom within that to provide excellent tailored services. So I think that's really the issue when we're avoiding it. It's really about the concept of being controlled and that we don't really understand what systemization versus standardization truly is.
Yeah, and that's a very good point in terms of standardizing as compared to systemizing. As a creative, I'll tell you this first, and that's where I started. Systemizing was definitely the enemy first because we always thought it was standardizing things for creative people, and totally relate to that. But it's not. It actually can be quite a strength. So, Krys, I'm going to bring you back in again. So, just wanted to, what are some of the challenges then a business owner faces when developing systems for their business?
Yep, I think Kerry touched a lot on it in relation to control. I know with my personal experience, it was all about control, and I felt that no one knew the business like I did. In saying that, it wasn't until I engaged someone as a business coach that I really made leaps and bounds, where I was able to relinquish that control a bit, but be part of the process, and being able to grow my team to, over 200 people today. I think cash is another thing. Cash is another barrier, because as a small business owner, you're weighing up, is it worth it? Is it worth it? How much is it going to cost? It's not dragging any income in. So it's changing that mindset as well, which is quite difficult. For me, the biggest thing was having the right people in the right seats to develop the policies and have that buy-in that we were talking about earlier. And I suppose you just don't know what you don't know, and being able to relinquish that control was the biggest thing for me.
Yeah, fantastic. It's funny, I've got a great question here for Namiki, but I think I'll get you to answer it as well. Namiki, once you've, sorry, let me just get you in. So once you've built this system, there's then onboarding your staff and training them on how to use the systems. How do you then get staff to follow the procedures and systems built after that?
Yeah, it's a great question, because it doesn't happen overnight. It takes time. You have to really start thinking about, okay, if this is where I'm going with my business, if I want that complete business reliability and I want to step out of it and systems are important, I need to develop this as a culture. And it takes, as I said, some time. And you want to get your staff over time saying, this is how we do things here. It just becomes part of their everyday process and their culture. But starting with actually hiring with that philosophy in mind, so you can actually start to embed your systems into your recruitment process. So it can be part of your your interviewing or your filtering process, where you might have a sample task and you'll get that new hire to perform it as part, that would be part of their role if they were hired, and you link it to a system and they'll actually use the system. So they're literally coming in saying, oh, there's a system. Here's what I've got to follow, part of my assessment. You're sort of building it up from the ground up. And then as you're onboarding your new team members, you're going to give them some systems training right from the beginning, and you're using your systems in the training. And the other thing, which is really helpful, is, as I alluded to in the presentation, of identifying a systems champion. So it's someone already on your team, or that you can identify and bringing into your team, where they're happy with process and attention to detail, and they love actually documenting those procedures. They'll become an advocate for saying, hey guys, this is how we do things. Here's the procedure. Let's get back to it. They're it's not all on your shoulders. So as I said, it happens over time, but you can use it in your onboarding of your new team members for recruiting, and then identifying a systems champion, so it's not all on your shoulders.
Yeah, I think Krys actually mentioned that earlier too, in terms of finding the right people taking over particular areas, isn't it, Krys? So I'd love to hear your experience around this. Obviously, you have 300 employees, so you must be doing something right with systems and processes for sure.
Yeah. Look, I'm more of an on-the-ground type of person. We speak about this word founder dependence, and that was the biggest thing for us, because what I was finding was everyone was coming up and saying, all right, Krys, what do I do? All right, Krys, what do I do? All right, Krys, what do I do? And I reached that point where I was just like, I'm done. I need to tap out. For me, what it was, and Namiki touched on this, when we were talking about onboarding, we really profiled the people that we were bringing into our company. And we did a thing called a DIS profile, which I'm sure a lot of people would know. And we were looking for people with highest. We wanted those people that thought that way. In relation to building those systems, I think it was more of a, I suppose, peace offering that I was part of that process, because I would offer suggestions, and sometimes I would get shut down. So it's creating a culture that making mistakes is okay as well, and calling it out is okay. What I found was my team needed the buy-in right at the beginning, and then once we had those systems in place, my management are the ones that are able to, I suppose, make sure that that's happening correctly. In saying that, I'm speaking about pretty specific industries, so that might not work for all of them. But that buy-in is imperative. But it's also the way that you position when you onboard is saying that these are the systems in place. Just because we've always done it like this doesn't mean it's right. If someone's got something to offer, you need to have a culture where it's okay for them to come and talk to you. And I suppose that's something that I think that our company, our group of companies do very well, that we create that culture where if the system is not working, I want them to give me feedback so they know that they've got that support. Because the system's one part. It's the system, but then it's the people. And you need to create that culture where it's safe. So for me, that was probably,
I mean, technology changes all the time. These systems get updated all the time. So I could imagine that you cannot stop looking for the best systems to run things efficiently. So it's as simple as that. I'm sure Ishan would have a couple of things around this, but I'll get Brian and Prue in for my next question. So Brian, you've worked closely with a lot of big brands, franchisors and franchisees. Can you tell us first off what a franchise is from a business perspective?
It's the broadest definition you can imagine. It's any business which is leverageable. And people sort of look aghast at that. But the reality is, if you look at Jim's Mowing I worked with years ago, helping them set up in Western Australia, and a lot of concepts as well. There's a preconception amongst people that a business needs to have been running for 5 or 10 years or be already systemized. In fact, you couldn't often be further from the truth. The reality is, people don't realize the businesses out there that are actually franchised don't have a high profile as such. I mean, even people like Jetstar is a franchise internationally. And so are most car dealers and so forth. But the typical concept that we see is something like one of our clients came to us in a franchise expo about 4 years ago. They're called National Drones 5 years ago. And that was when drones, you say the speed of technology, drones had just appeared. They were a fanciful toy. And they said, we've registered a business name and a trademark, National Drones, and we've been to see lots of people, and they all tell us we're nuts. And I smile because I suppose I tend to be more on the adventurous side. I said, it's fantastic. I can see the people as prospective franchisees who like big boys' toys, who want to get out there and do this sort of thing. And they started systemizing with us. They worked through, we've got a systems division in our business because franchising is significant part is systems of one shape or another, systems to grow. And within 3 months, they launched their business, no pun intended. And they were at the franchise show in Sydney and did remarkably well. I think they had 19 franchises in less than 2 years. So the range of businesses is really significant. The limitations I've always thought came, I was a building developer and contractor, and I was a quantity surveyor. I used to think you couldn't franchise a building business. Well, I've been proven very, very wrong, and I'm working with builders at the moment. But for example, the one area I always said would be difficult was a brain surgeon. Typical of something like that, where there's an extremely high level of expertise and qualification, then there's probably not a lot of people. But we're working with dental surgeons and physiotherapists and other people in the medical space. So there's literally no limit. At the end of the day, what people have to understand that franchising isn't the concept that people think of as an us and them. It's actually a partnership. What you're doing is accumulating business partners. And so rather than having staff on your team, what you're having is a team of business partners who have responsibility for their area of the business, which is the part you're delivering at the moment, which is the product or the service. And your client becomes your franchise partner. So that's why they don't appreciate, you need to be committed to putting in manuals for the franchisee and for the franchisor, and they're equally as important. You've got to have both sides of the equation. So that's the sort of short answer. I would point you towards my book. I think there's a soft copy of it in the satchel of the bag, or go to our website, franchisesimply.com.au, and there's heaps of information there.
Yeah, well, I can tell you firsthand that events use a lot of drones. So especially with fireworks are now being replaced by drones. So it's definitely an exciting area, and the amount of things that we've seen out there now, from mail delivery to all that. So it doesn't surprise me that they are where they are. Prue, how do we then know if a business is suited for franchising then?
There are a number of things. I guess the first thing is there a demand for the product? The first stage of any business being set up, you've got to prove the demand. But it doesn't have to be proven. You can start something from concept as long as you've got a pretty good idea that you've got a market there and you've got the product there. The second thing is it potentially profitable? And that doesn't just mean profitable for one business. It needs to be profitable for both sides of the business. So it needs to be profitable for franchisor as well as for franchisee. It's the franchisees who are bringing in the money, but they're bringing in the money for the franchisor as well. The third thing then, are there likely to be prospective franchisees out there in the market who are able to deliver your product to your ideal client in a way that's going to be successful? I noticed that Krys spoke about disc profiles, which we would rely on quite significantly for this as well. Do you have people with the right personality and the right skill set to be able to get out there and deliver your product? And for some business types, this can prove to be really difficult. A massage therapist, for instance, would be somebody who's quite soft, listening, emphatic sort of person, and probably not very good at picking up the phone and making those hardcore marketing calls. So if you were going to go into a massage therapy franchise, you would be making sure that your franchisee was probably somebody who could look after your clients and be soft, but you as franchisor probably need to give them the support to take on the business aspects that they're just not going to succeed at. You're creating a team. You have to work as a team from both sides. Okay. And then finally is the thing that we've been talking about all day. Can it be systemized? Can it be systemized for the franchisee, and can it be systemized for the franchisor? We find that we have to approach this as a big picture thing. We can't do it in the way that Naomi was talking about and come in and pick the critical things first. We actually have to do it from the point of view of a big picture because it's a requirement. We have at least to have a franchisee systems manual.
Can you elaborate a little bit on that big picture? What do you mean by that? So, yeah. Right.
Okay. So at the end of the day, your systems are going to be written. There's going to be a mass of documents, whether they're in software or on paper or wherever they are. There's a mass of pages of one kind or another. And this is the bit that can be overwhelming that everyone's talking about. It's just this creation of things. And what we find, because we have to write the whole manual in one go, what we find we have to do is to build the big picture of everything, either on a whiteboard or generally in an Excel sheet of some kind, where it's all listed and you're able to manipulate it and move things backwards and forwards and make sure that you've got linkings, and it's like building a building.
I was going to say that it feels like it's like building a building, but
it is, and it's why it's overwhelming.
So it starts. It really starts from the top, then.
Absolutely, we have to start
to where, yeah.
Yes, it's the other way around. We have to start from the top. Yes.
We start with the strategy that getting that done, but then you review the fundamentals, their branding and marketing.
Yeah.
Are they credible, or do they need to be reworked? Or often we find, the brand needs to be rejigged in a number of ways, maybe new logos. And then you look at budgeting and areas like that. So you've got to work progressively. And the systems actually, core systems actually come later in the piece, more towards when you do your franchise agreements and so forth. And that's where people come adrift, unfortunately. The people who I think often tend to make mistakes in franchising are those that go to the end first and perhaps get their franchise agreement done. But it's a bit like planning a holiday, jumping on the plane and not having an itinerary. You need to work out where you want to go first.
Of course. Yeah, interesting, though, because, obviously some of these small businesses approach you guys to build these systems and processes for them, or this big catalog, thinking that their systems and processes are better than, do you know what I mean, than what you guys are doing. But really, you guys are coming completely from the top, and you would have to really dissect the whole business and show them a completely different strategy, which is very interesting, because you never thought of it that way, which is incredible. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. But I'll just quickly wanted to ask Kerry and bring Kerry in for this one. So how does a business then approach navigating effectiveness versus efficiency when it comes to small business? I mean, we just heard from Brian and Prue that they come from the top down, but effectiveness and now efficiency, understanding those differences so that they can become a better business. Kerry?
Well, I think you need to begin with outcomes. So before you even start saying what's our strategy, you've actually got to ask the question and take the time to identify outcomes that you actually want for yourself, what you want for your business as outcomes, and then what outcomes your customers want from you. So when we're clear about what is that end goal, what's it got to look like, then it makes it far easier for us to be able to determine what's going to be the balance between being really, really efficient, which is getting it done as quickly and as cost effectively as possible, and delivering an experience and outcomes effectively and intentionally. So sometimes that does mean that not everything can be automated, not everything can be templated. And if we get the right parts of the process templated, automated, and it really as locked down as possible when it comes to systems and processes, then it leaves us some room for tailoring and bespoke service. And that's the experience factor. And I think that has to tie into your overall business strategy, because your business strategy should be built on essentially what it is you want to represent in the marketplace, which is your brand, but also what your values are. And of course, those values should dictate what your policies are in your organisation, what your procedures are, and then what the processes are and the systems that have to support that. And that could look like, integrity might be a major factor for you as a business, that you want to stand for that. It's something you want to see underpinned. Well, to make that possible, right down at the coalface, no matter how many people you have in a team, whether it's just you or you've got 100 people, people need to understand what integrity looks like and why they perform the job that they do and why they have to do it in a certain way, because it polishes that brand. It reinforces those values. So I think it's about outcomes. If we're not sure what the outcomes are that we want and what our customers want for us, then we end up creating something that actually is wonderfully systemized and streamlined and all these wonderful things, but it actually doesn't hit the mark. And so, as Brian and Prue was saying, if you're not clear about how this business, whether it's franchisable or not franchisable, is actually going to fulfill its requirements to both a franchisee, to a partner, to a customer, then it's going to be very difficult to begin that process and head in the right direction. So I think that balance of efficiency and effectiveness comes from intentionality and purpose.
Well, thank you so much, Kerry. I guess, Ishan, what tips can you then share for small businesses to effectively solve problems, to improve productivity based on that?
Yes, Eob. So wonderful. If I can just piggyback on to what Kerry was just talking about, so being effective and being efficient, right? So in in my world, so exactly as Kerry said, efficient is kind of doing it in as quickly as you can, kind of like that first time right kind of thinking. And the effectiveness in my world is trying to do more of the right things. So this is where I think the problem solving comes in. So if there are areas where you're losing time, you're losing resources, you're wasting raw material, if you were a manufacturing business again, then you'd want to be able to find those areas and work on it. Now, there are areas where things are pretty apparent and pretty clear. If you have a look at your profit and loss statement, these are the ones that are kind of have a negative variance, or the numbers that are in red that your accountant will show to you, the money that's actually bleeding from your P&L, from your profitability. So these are the obvious ones. But then there are areas that are not so obvious. In my corporate days, there are examples where operators have pointed out saying, yeah, everything's hunky-dory now, but there's even a better way of doing things. And this is where the effectiveness comes in, is that how can we do things kind of focus on those right things, so that we don't use less and we don't use more of our resources. So to be able to do this, one of the key things we need to focus on, and this might just sound like a cliche or something that you've heard on before, but I can't emphasize the importance of prioritizing, because whether you're a small business or a big business, no one has got idle resources to work on these projects or initiatives or areas that we can solve problems. So trying to ruthlessly prioritize becomes the most important factor. And how do you do that? Well, if it is the one that's bleeding most of the money, it seems like a constraint point. If something's going to give you the biggest growth opportunity, that might seem like another good opportunity. And if you can find one that's going to align both of them, yeah, well, you're on to a big winner. So trying to find those real critical constraint points or growth points is number one. And the second one I'll leave you with is, don't take these on to your shoulders as to you need to solve these. There's a great book called 4DX, 4 Disciplines of Execution, by Krys McChesney. I think he's from the Covey Institute lads. And he talks about this concept as well, whereas where create a team, whether it's 3 to 4 members. So it's like a cross-functional team. And if you're in a small business, you might only have half a dozen people from which you're going to pick 3 people. But give them the problem of, I want you to solve this constraint. I want you to solve this problem of why we've been losing money on this issue over the last 2 months. And give them not just one day, not just 1 week, but maybe that 10 weeks. I always rely on that 10 weeks. It's kind of count with your fingers. Why? Because it fits into a business quarter, which is 13 weeks, quite nicely. So if you give people an opportunity, saying like, go and fix this collectively, meet every week, but see if you can find what the real issues are and how you can collectively solve this, amazing things have come to fruition. So ruthlessly prioritize and find those constraints or the growth opportunities, find 3 or 4 people and allocate them and empower them to go and solve those problems collectively.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ishan. Namoki, I'll bring you in here. We just wanted to see if, obviously we've been talking about all the benefits of systemizing. Is systemizing a business enough? Or all one needs to do? And if not, why?
Yeah, another good question. I think, look, we've alluded to this earlier. It's, you want to get your staff to follow procedures and processes. So you can systemize, you can have everything documented, but if you haven't sort of brought it in as a culture and gotten the buy-in from your team, you're only going to shift so much. So you want the systems extracted, the performance of the teams and the performance of the systems and the team and the business, and then buy-in. And when you have those 3 things together, you're achieving what you've set out to achieve in terms of systemizing. But yeah, it's not just my documented system sitting there. It's how the team uses them. Have they got the right sort of frame of mind in cultivating this is how we do things. Yes, we're open to optimizing is a very important part of systemizing a business, but you can optimize once you've got something in place. It's much, much easier to, have your systems documented and say, well, this is best practice because we've got a business that works. We've got a going concern. It's already working. So let's not reinvent the wheel just yet. Let's get everyone up to best practice, right? Our current best practice, and then we can start to optimize. And that's really, really important. So, it's just, as I said, if you haven't got it's like the missing piece of the puzzle. If you haven't got the buy-in and you haven't developed that culture over time, you're going to miss that complete business reliability. So, yeah, it's your documented systems, your team following, and the culture being developed, if that makes sense. You're on mute, Eob.
I said absolutely. Well, Krys, I wanted to bring you in for the next question, actually, because this is really relevant. I guess what opportunities then implementing systems brings to a business?
Yep. Look, there's a lot of buzzwords around. You can say leverage, all of that kind of stuff, cash, yeah, all of that. I'm going to go back to my original question that you asked me. And for me, the biggest thing of implementing a successful systems is it saved me time, energy, and money. Mm-hmm. And that's it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we definitely know that it does that. So it's amazing how us as small business owners get caught up in that world, and we really need that outside perspective sometimes to come in and show us. And I had a really good conversation with Kerry actually on Friday on our Biz Life show about this, about bringing people from the outside to see what you can do better in your business. So, Kerry, how do you manage all the challenges? How do you manage all the changes and challenges if you've procedurized your business and everything changes suddenly? Like, obviously we're in a pandemic and everything keeps changing every second, and the events industry, as you know, has been hit quite hard by that. What would your advice be around that?
Look, my advice, I think, to anybody who even attempts to go into business for themselves is you need to learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable, and you should expect a pandemic. I talk about every day being a pandemic in my world, because it's just continuous change, and you either become comfortable with that or it becomes really unenjoyable as a business owner. But I think, when you're creating systems and processes in your business, you do have to embrace it in a way that you have some that are rigid and some that are flexible. And, the rigidity has to come around compliance. There are certain things where you have to make sure to meet government requirements or authority requirements, that we have some really strict and rigid processes that are the first priority every single time. But then everything else around that can become flexible, but it is how you design it, and it's also how you continue to update it as well. So having good systems to help you do that, so you can see what all the linkages are from one process to the other, is really, really important. I think also the other thing you have to be when you create processes, when you sit down and actually start thinking about what is the process going to look like, what's the system going to look like for us, is you have to be a pessimist. You cannot be an optimist in this. Unfortunately, entrepreneurs are optimists. We don't think anything's going to go wrong. We've got an amazing idea. And everybody's going to want it. So we're not expecting the worst of people. We're not expecting the worst of situations. We have a faint idea in the back of our minds that maybe someone won't pay our bill or something, and that's about as hard as it's going to get. So you really do have to ask yourself at every step and stage of the development of a process or a system, what could go wrong? What if this job, this order, this customer doesn't work the way that we think it will work? What would we do in that situation? So there really does have to be a plan A, B, C, D, and E, F, and G for everything. And it's about saying, well, when we automate something as a process, we need to prepare ourselves for the next disaster. If we can't deliver, if our freight forwarders fail, if the price goes up, of the currency rate, what's the allowances we're going to make? So one of the things that most businesses don't have is a disaster recovery plan. I can stand in a room full of people, and I literally did this about 3 weeks ago and said, put your hand up if you've got a disaster recovery plan. I think one person out of 60 said, yes, I do. And they were across every kind of industry imaginable. Now, a disaster recovery plan is not an IT thing. It's a business thing. It's about saying what's going to go wrong, what would happen if it goes wrong or just doesn't work the way we thought it would. So I think moving quickly to be able to pivot with challenges that will occur, the simple process that I encourage people to use is what I call TCP, and it's the take stock process. And essentially, your TCP is a deliberate period of time, and it's usually quite a fast period of time, but you're prepared to do this, where you take stock of the situation. And that's where we basically go through and say, right, let's remove all the distractions for a few moments. And if that means you're stepping out of the office somewhere which is going to allow you just to think straight and not be bombarded by distractions, turn off the news, get the facts directly from the source, whatever the situation might be. So it's amassing some knowledge to help you to make a good decision. In some cases, you might have to ask for time to respond. So in some cases, you may have to tell people, look, I just need a couple of hours. I need a day to cannibalize all this information and consume it so I can give you an accurate response. And that includes your teams as well, who may be begging you for information. You need to play the scenarios out right through to their end, because there's usually a couple of different pathways that are open to you when something changes, but not all of them are the right one. They might seem that way from the very start of your thinking process, but when you really do play it out right through to its end of scenario, it may not have been the best choice. So it's about providing yourself with time and thinking space to make good choices. And then you can decide on what's your most effective path. And one of the big parts of that is counting the costs of whatever that plan's going to be, whatever the pivot's going to be, whatever the change is going to be. There is always a cost of some kind. You've got to decide whether you're willing to wear that cost. And a really simple example is during the COVID period, there were a couple of situations where we played out, even in our own business, maybe we could do this, maybe you could do that. And as we worked through those scenarios very quickly within a couple of days, when we looked at what the cost was going to be to actually affect the pivot and the change, it wasn't even worth doing. It was actually better for us to sit on our hands and wait out, a month or two than it was to implement that change, because it actually would have served us absolutely nothing other than wasted time and resource and a lot of extra pain for people. So I think really then the last part of that process of taking stock is then to communicate confidently with stakeholders and customers, and that includes your teams, and implement that new process or plan and make sure that you've considered, is this going to be part of our go forward plan in the long term? Has it actually fundamentally changed our processes, or is this just a disaster recovery response that will be implemented only if this situation occurs from time to time? But that take stock process is really important, and most people haven't built that in to their time and energy, and for their teams to actually spend doing what's necessary to make good choices to pivot processes. So it's about reducing your stress and making better choices when challenges come, because they will. Absolutely, that's guaranteed. If it's not a pandemic, it'll be a flood, it'll be a whatever. Yeah. We should expect it and plan for it.
Yeah, absolutely. The ups and downs of being a business owner, small business is not an easy game.
That's the fun bit.
It's a fun bit too. Yes, it is. It is one of the fun bits. That's why we're in it. That's why we get stuck into it, which is great. But I do want to finish off. So we are a little bit over time, but I do want to finish off with Brian and Prue, because I want to see what advice they can give us on, building our own franchises. So how do you then franchise your business, Brian? Because the dream, I think, for a lot of small businesses would be franchising their business. Some have become. There's definitely owners that want that direction, and there are definitely owners that want to have that bespoke, small business that tailors to really to that particular client. So how do I franchise my business, Brian?
I suppose first you run through that evaluation with those few steps that Prue went through earlier, just to see whether you meet that criteria. And then it's a matter really of, I suppose, getting to understand what franchising really is, fundamentals. I mean, a lot of us think we know what franchising is, and we've probably got a bit of an idea, but understanding there is that relationship element, and not everyone's comfortable with that. They want total control, therefore they're not prepared to relinquish it in any way. And then it's really about working out what suits them, because every franchise is different, just like every business is different. There are fundamentals, but the more you look at business, particularly with the dramatic changes in the last couple of decades, and especially the last couple of years with tech and so forth, they vary enormously. So it's working through evaluating those and seeing what's the simplest way to get up and running. Look, at a lot of our clients don't actually franchise because they decide they'd rather grow as a corporate entity. Or from time to time they end up merging or being taken over. It's an ideal exit strategy. So it's working through that process and really committing to a program, which might take them 3 months, might take them a year. It just depends on their resources, their skill sets, and their commitment. That's really the key to it. And I think that the commitment is the one thing we look at probably the deepest with people. Are they committed to really achieving something? Are they someone you feel you can trust who's going to be reliable and do their share? Because whoever we work with, whatever level, sometimes we might do all their systems for you or for them, or we may do their rebranding. But at the end of the day, you need their continual involvement. They're not just washing their hands and saying, can you come back with a franchise, which is what people often misunderstandably think they can do. It would be lovely, but they wouldn't know the first thing about what's happening in their business, because I don't know how to run their business.
I think one thing I'd like to point out about the difference between running an ordinary business and running a franchise is running a single business, or, might have a lot of outlets. You are very focused on the product and delivery of the product. But the thing about it is that when you franchise, you actually are delegating that responsibility to your franchisees. And I think Tom Potter, from when he first franchised Eagle Boys, said it really well. I've moved from the pizza business to the people business. And a lot of people that we work with actually find it very difficult to realize that they're no longer dealing with the daily widgets. And they actually have to take that step up to be working on the business, and they're looking after people, and they need to become involved with leadership.
Oh, that's excellent.
I think someone said earlier about an entrepreneur, I think it was Krys, they're out there to drive the business and so forth. So often they need a sweeper. They need someone there behind them who's actually making sure things happen and nursing them through it. And every big entrepreneur you look at, they may be a picture up there, whether you look at Twiggy or even going back to the days of Alan Bond. There are a team of people in the back rooms working like mad, trying to keep up with their demands, which can often be quite outrageous and fickle.
Well, you can't sweep these days, that's for sure. Everything is super transparent, and you have to build your culture, like everything that Kerry said. So very interesting. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, everyone. What a great insight into systems and processes. I mean, we heard it from franchise experts all the way to a productive expert. So thank you so much for joining us today. We'll end the session today. If you guys want to connect with Brian and Prue or Kerry, Ishan, Krys, and Namoki, please jump on LinkedIn as well. Don't hesitate to reach out to them, because they'd love to chat to you.